Welcome to EDD 405, Leadership, Creating, Modeling, and Producing Excellence. Module 2, we hope you enjoyed the modeling work in Module 1. We'll be doing more on that and working on new projects, obviously. Tonight's course is very much about what makes a good leader, an effective leader.
Right. So if you think about being a good leader, when you're interacting, you're going to need to be a good leader yourself. You're going to also want to recognize the environment of your athlete that you're working with.
Right.
What environment are they coming from? A lot of times it'll be what we might call a nurturing environment, and other times it might not be quite so nurturing. In order to help your athlete, you're going to want to know the structure of what's going on and what they need to deal with in order to move through and to get the positive results.
Mm-hmm. Right, so you and I were talking about not only for you as sports psychologist to be a leader, but how do you create the leadership in the athlete, the leadership in the coach or the managers that you're dealing with, the upper management, the owners, depending on what your pathway is. So I think it's an important topic, and we'll do a lot throughout this whole course. Then we go into qualities of effective leaders.
Things that are common.
And then how to elicit that from within yourself, within somebody else.
And then how to give useful feedback. Giving feedback is easy. It's like, just do it the way I say, right?
Yeah.
Giving useful feedback that is timely and effective and in a way that someone else can accept it in a healthy way.
Right.
We have
some tools for that.
some tools.
Yeah. And then we're going to give you just touching on the history of more modern leadership. Where have some of our philosophies come from, the things that are taught in different universities like ours, and so that you can become the best leader that you can be, using your own personal style.
And then, like we talked about way back when, it's always good to have quotes and stories and metaphors. And so we found just a few that we thought were really fun for leaders.
And inspiring.
Right.
Yes. And we will have more on different styles of leadership throughout the course. Tonight is the first sort of overview and module of that. So let's start right out with what makes an effective leader. Good, I think, in my terms, is someone who really can lead a group of people or one person or a crowd of people effectively.
Right, and effective, positive, there's a lot of different words you can use. It's how do you get people from point A to point B if that's in the best interest.
Right. So we thought we would have you, first of all, the qualities and behaviors of leaders that you have admired, whether they're people you've been in personal contact with, people you've read about, biographies you've read.
Be historical.
Right. So that you'll begin to find the nuggets inside of the training that we're giving you that will work for you best.
And then the other part of that question is, what effective qualities and behaviors have you recognized from people in a position of leadership? Now, some people are leaders because daddy made them a leader, or they were appointed by a political figure or something like this. So they're in a position of leadership. And some of them are very effective. Some of them you'd have to say, are very positive. Others maybe not so much. So when we talk about leaders, we have to recognize that there's a person who leads, and there's a person in a position where they should lead, and they may not be leading in an appropriate way.
Correct. So that oftentimes leadership comes from within the group, as well as the person who's standing in front.
Right.
So what are some of the aspects of how this dovetails with our hemispheric integration work and the behaviors of specific leaders all the way up that chart? Right.
And specific behaviors for the hemisphere. Something you have a great vision, and if it's not okay, the vision would be more of a right hemisphere. What's a positive thing? But if they don't have a mission that is in balance with it, it's going to fail.
Right, they'll go off course. That doesn't work, and it's also how do you inspire others with your vision or your mission,
right.
Your goal.
It's how to champion a cause.
Right. So again, using our chart to see where at each level what makes an effective leader and what could be missing, and how do we then later find out how to update that.
And as always, we will use the templates that we find are very useful in gathering information and identifying some of the qualities we're looking for.
Well, just we were talking about inspiring leaders. Some leaders are great at making a vision, not so good at getting a group to follow it.
Right.
So it's important to have those aspects or create a team that has those various aspects in that.
Right.
So some of the basic character traits, and these will be in your manual notes as well. But first, the person who's the leader or in a position of leading has to be honest. It has to be sincere.
And what we're talking about is, once again, there are people in a position where other people are required to follow them for one reason or another.
Like a boss.
They are not always honest. What we're talking about are the ones that are effective, that are long-term, and the ones that would be chosen to lead if there were a vote for it,
Right.
and hopefully a consensus.
And I think the word for me that encompasses some of this is being authentic, in that sense of...
Well, some people can be authentically ill-advised.
Well, that's true. Okay.
So, I mean, no, authentic is, I mean, if you're authentic, I will agree that if you're not authentic, it's going to be really hard to be in a position of leadership.
Yes. Thank you. And deceptive behavior, we're trying to create trust, and we can't have someone follow us. You have those con artist things that go, just trust me. And it's like, I saw a poster once of this Black Panther where he's just licking his lips and he goes, no, trust me. And it's like, yeah, right. So the second part would be to be competent. In other words, you have to know what you're leading and what you're leading about and where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those functions there is to not behave childlike. In other words, you want to lead from that sort of push-pull flow rather than reverting to begging and whining and pleading and screaming and getting your way, trying to get your way.
And then forward-looking, knowing how to set goals and have a vision of the future, like we mentioned. And then the vision has to be owned throughout the organization.
Yes.
So if it's just the position of leadership that has the vision, it's going to be like pushing a rope uphill.
That doesn't sound very good. So good leaders habitually pick priorities stemming from their basic values. So again, we're in that hemispheric chart of beliefs and values. That comes back to any relationship, whether I'm working with a couple or a single person working to relate with friends, or an organizational team. We often talk about top-down leadership, where the person at the top inspires and influences or contradicts what the rest of the team is doing. So there we are, inspiring.
Inspiring, right.
Display confidence in all that you do by showing that sense of endurance in your mental, physical, and spiritual stamina. You'll inspire others to reach for their new heights.
And then there will come a time when it's necessary to take charge.
Right. And so oftentimes the leader is challenging somebody or inspiring them, and people sometimes are pretty complacent. Oh, it's good enough for now, which could be true. However, the leader says, and then what? What's else beyond?
And then intelligent, it becomes the responsibility of the leader to stay updated in the current trends for the field, and that is a responsibility. I mean, even if it's delegated to have someone go research something, it's still the job of the leader to make sure that happens.
And incorporate it, right. And then obviously being fair-minded. If you're working with a group or a team or a corporate world, or training in your gym, show fair treatment to all people. So prejudice is sort of the enemy of any kind of justice. We've talked about that before in our difference in preference, in that sense of not having right-wrongness about things, but having a goal and saying, is that getting us closer to the goal, or is it going somewhere else? So that we're keeping out of that judgment. So that you can display empathy by being sensitive to the person's feelings and values and interests and the well-being of others. Yeah.
And then being broad-minded, I think this becomes more evident in our culture daily almost, is seek out diversity. I mean, it's an example is a lot of times we'll work with couples or people who want to be in a couple, and it seems like they're going out and looking for someone that is just like them. I was thinking, you've already got that. With Marilyn and I, we're very different, and it's because of her skills, her uniqueness, her background, that I've learned a lot, and I hopefully vice versa.
Similar.
And so by diversifying, we've brought in more than we would have if we just looked for the same thing. So expanding that base of potential is diversity.
Correct. And also the diversity in the sense of incorporating differences. There's different cultures, there are different belief systems, different politics, religions, ethnicity. I mean, there's all kinds of differences, and being respectful to those differences and learning about them. I had a corporate job at one time that was training trainers, and in that organization they had 5 different major cultures and 5 different languages. All of those people who were in the position of trainers in the different departments needed to understand each of the cultures because they had different nonverbal behaviors and beliefs about what was appropriate. We had some of the cultures that were not allowed to look in someone's eyes. That was difficult in this sort of people-oriented environment, and how to be respectful to that and sort of culture them into the new culture of the environment. It was quite a trick. So, then being courageous.
Courage is always useful. I can't think of an example where it's not. So being a leader, courage, it's like Maren talks about, from the top down. If the leader demonstrates and owns courage, it will be recognized and it will be fostered throughout the
Right.
whole culture.
And courage is that sense of willing to take a risk once the reward is recognized and the risk, the danger of the risk. You want to have a higher percentage of chance for the reward than there's a chance that it's not going to work. And a leader is the one that has to evaluate those things and display confidence and calmness whenever things get maybe a little more chaotic.
And then being straightforward, using sound judgment to make decisions at the right time.
Right, and I heard a quote the other day, I don't know if I can say it. It's making the right decision, good decisions at the right time, but it was also making the right decision at the right time. Yeah, it was interesting.
Even though it may not be a popular decision.
Correct, right. So these qualities, I know there are many more we could talk about, but this is a good beginning, are respected in an individual, and whether a person is in the position of authority or simply a member of the group, that person can be perceived as a leader. And here's our chart again. So we were talking about here at the beliefs and values level, what are those values that a leader holds dear to their heart and that they live and work through? And then, of course, our level of behaviors. What's your style? Are you a walk-around group? Are you hands-on? Are you a little more step back? We're going to go on and discuss more on that.
Well, I'll go back to that for a moment.
That's right.
But I think one of the important parts of this is, okay, we want to identify it as for individual leaders, but I had an opportunity to work for a large corporation, and one of the things I noticed is that they gave a lot of lip service to customer service, fairness, honesty, those kind of
Some
things.
of those things we just talked
Right.
about, yeah.
And what they were doing is going from they were okay, they get together and they do what's our mission statement, or what is our core value statement, whatever it might be. And they're giving this great lip service. We're going to go out and we're going to be fair to man, woman, child, and we're going to make the world a better place, and we're going to save the planet for all the people that we haven't even thought of yet. And that sounds great. I mean, it makes a great little letterhead, but when it drops below the deep structure, in other words, to the skills, capabilities, behaviors, and in the environment, the very statements that they were using were being violated from their behaviors. Basically, they made it impossible.
They being management.
Management, higher decision management,
yeah.
right? That they made it impossible for the people further down the line to support and honor the mission statements. So a lot of times you'll see people in the position of leadership, they'll have the great words for it, the great attitude, the great, inspiration. And if it doesn't match all the levels, if the identity of the organization is not manifested through the behaviors in the environment, there's something wrong. If it's out of balance, it needs to be tweaked. It needs to be like with Marilyn, when she has her right hemisphere interpretation of the hemispheric spheres, it's that glue that holds it all together. It has to be in balance or it will fail.
And again, we talk about congruency and incongruency. So anytime you're noticing in the leadership role an incongruent leader, whether it's a mom or a dad or a boss or a family member, it's not healthy for anybody, right?
Right.
Okay. And then we have given you the strategic processing filters, and again, we're just rolling these things back in so you get a deeper structure learning. But what are the processing filters of a leader specifically?
Well, and I would suggest that a healthy, accessible balance in every strategic processing filter is useful as a leader. I can't think of any of them that a leader can ignore.
Right. They have to be an internal authority. They have to be able to gather information. They need the balance of away from danger towards the vision.
Success.
Right. They need to have that overall concept and the details.
And they can't just sit there and do the dreaming without having the structure in place and operable
Right.
to support the dream.
However, I attended a small group training the other day, and I was observing, and the person who was the leader is the left brain lead. He did a magnificent job. He neglected to give the big picture at the beginning, which created tons of questions. It was, well, what about, and what about, and what about?
Probably throughout the presentation.
Because there was no framework to put the details in that we were working on. And it was just, he's training to be a leader, and it was something that he just naturally did his left brain style, was just launch into the details. And there was no, and I looked around the group, it was a small group, about 12 people, and I could see some of the, just the quizzicalness and the head tilts and the kind of thing, and then questions. As a leader, he'll learn that. It was my job to give some feedback, and I will. So we want to have the overall concept, and then of course there's also the details, or what hits the, the rubber hits the road, makes it work. We want to make a plan. It's really, really important to have a structural integrity, and yet sometimes you hit a detour, you have to have the options to be able to make.
You have to know what happens in case.
And I think one of the crucial things as a leader is that maintaining that balance between getting the task done and keeping a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And when we talk about presentation and group dynamics, we'll address that further, because there are ways to do that. Somebody who is just out to make friends might be a good leader. They might not. I mean, there's if everything's fine, then they'll be a good leader, or perceived as a good leader. But when things get tough and they have to get people on task, they need to know how to bring things back to task without breaking relationship. And there are techniques for that, and great leaders know how to do that.
Yeah, and those are some of the details we'll be giving you in the next modules. Yes. Then also the leader needs to be able to obviously do independent work on that person alone, but they need to be cooperative as a team as well. And then the last one is about information and creativity. Good job, good idea to have both.
Right.
We're going to make a good plan. So again, you have your basic templates. It's such a good structural integrity to know you can always go back to that if something's not going well. Right? So looking at these things, first of all, for yourself, and just defining in your own heart and mind and experience what works for you and what doesn't. That's, I think, one of the best filters, and what experiences you've had. And then we're going to be reaching out into other experts and other hemispheric work to help you through that. Okay. Now we have the basic presuppositions, right, that you have had since 402. So I'd like you to review those. They'll be in your manual, because an effective leader has a consistent filter through each of the presuppositions.
Because remember, the presuppositions are not, it doesn't necessarily mean they're an absolute universal truth. We do find, however, that when you're working with people, if you come from that initial filter of each of those, you tend to be more successful, and they tend to get more out of it.
Well, and one of the ones I like in this one is the very last one. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Right, because we have our 3 categories was safety, perspective, and learning.
Right.
And if you look through those again from the filter of leadership, I think you'll find a deeper level then again of working with those, right? So I
So,
think we'll pause here.
pause for a moment.
We'll take a pause and be back. We'll talk about the qualities.